Welcome back. We're back for another episode of the Chris McPherson Show, another weekly episode coming to you, all the black and white of your sporting landscape. No grey opinions here, and we've got a huge show coming to you. We're going to be talking about things from Donald Trump to Lleyton Hewitt through to the Dacosses. What more could you want on one show? We're looking forward to getting into it, and let's hit it around the ground straight away with Brody Burrows from the Third Man Up podcast. Bro, it's good to have you back.
Thanks, Chris. 3 elite sportsmen you've just named there, and like to see how they all tie in, mate. Really, just looking forward to see how you weasel those 3 together.
Oh, we've some magic. Don't worry about that, mate. I understand you're back after we talked about Jake Paul last week, and you're upset that you weren't involved in that conversation to deride the man who is now potentially a championship contender. I thought that was as ridiculous as the fight game broadly could get. But now we're talking about UFC at the White House.
Mate, I'd still take Donald Trump one-on-one against Jake Paul. That's how bad his boxing is, in my opinion. But yes, look, UFC, it's been announced that we've seen Donald Trump, obviously a huge fan of the UFC, does his own walkouts at a lot of the big events even. And look, it's going to be, I don't know what's going to happen, but we actually called it 3 or 4 weeks ago. John Jones, let's see how long this retirement lasts. In 2 weeks it lasted, gets announced it's going to be held at the White House. Oh, maybe I'm not going to be retired. And he's already re-entered the UFC drug pool. So not sure what he's done in these 2 weeks off, but hope he's made it worth it. And look, it's going to be a really interesting card. Conor McGregor's come out and said that a fight at the White House, he's interested. It's going to allow him to fully focus and spend time off his yachts. And look, I don't see that happening. He'll get one injury in training and one setback, and it'll be too hard, and he'll just go back to partying in Ibiza or something again, I imagine. But look, I expect this one to be headlined by John Jones and Tommy Aspinall. I'm calling it now. I think that will be the main event and the fight that everyone wants to see.
I thought it might be more just, authoritarian politics from Donald Trump. Might have Mahmoud Abbas fighting Benjamin Netanyahu in the main event.
Oh, who knows what's going to happen? Like, as long as Donald Trump doesn't have a say in the matchmaking, otherwise it's going to get bizarre. It's going to get truly bizarre, but I don't even know how this come to be, how it's going to be held, how it's going to be televised. Look, we all know the White House is it's got so much security around it, and then all of a sudden they're going to let cameramen, they're going to let fighters from all around the world in and their teams. It's just, I'm just blown away as to how this is going to work.
Look, afternoon, gentlemen. I thought I'd just pop in. Look, I got an idea of how it's going to look because we've seen a movie about this, and I'm just going to pop an image up on screen. This is what we're heading towards. We're heading towards idiocracy. Like it is now no longer just a movie; it is now a documentary.
Look at
both movies were documentaries, Brody.
Oh, Terry Crews is the president. You can't say everyone would rather Terry Crews right now in the White House rather than someone else. Look, he'd be great coming out there, make his boobies pop, and just take the light off everything else.
Yeah, exactly right. I'll get a booby dance going. Maybe we'll get Terry Crews, the main event versus Donald Trump. That could
give the people what they want.
Love the quotes from Donald Trump. We can have an event attended by 20 to 25,000 people. We have a lot of land there. Dunn is going to do it. Dunn is great. He's one of a kind. These two circle jerking each other. My goodness, I doff my cap to both of them. Got to in life, but this is just MAGA on MAGA on MAGA, steroided up, and oh my dear. Like, don't get me wrong. If someone offered me a ticket to go and watch this at the White House, I'm there, right? Like it's an epic thing that surely will never happen again if it does happen in the first place, and it's not a done deal.
There's so many questions as to why this would happen, but sign me up. Like, this isn't a Jake Paul versus Mike Tyson. This is just a weird kind of sit back and let's see what happens kind of a thing where, the whole world could burn down and just sitting there up. This is our life now. This is what the UFC is. And I just hope it doesn't turn the UFC into more of an entertainment rather than a sport. That's the only thing I'm worried about this on a serious note. But look, hopefully it's headlined by that fight that we all want to see. And if John Jones wins that, he goes down as the GOAT. If he doesn't, we've got a new contender on our hands.
We certainly do. Look, I'm all for cool and exotic locations so long as it doesn't take away from the actual, as you say, the quality of the fighters. And Donald Trump's not just, putting Elon Musk forward to fight against, Bill Gates or something. I think might pay to see that, but that's a whole other thing and another thing. Yeah, bizarre. I don't know how we're going to segue from that into this, but let's talk Tour de France. Let's just jump onto the next thing. There's another Aussie, I guess, probably a bit of a longer shot, becoming a hope now with Caden Groves is going to step in as the lead rider for Alpecin. It's unique, and I pronounced that wrong, the Belgian team, after Jasper Phillips and the stage one winner crashed out in a very ordinary crash in the third stage on Monday. He's broken his collarbone. He's going to be out for the rest of the race. And so now this is an opportunity for Groves to lead a team. We love seeing an Aussie. The Tour de France is a very, it's a very niche sporting community, but we've got a really strong record in performing well here. So great to see another Aussie given a chance to lead despite it being on the back of a tough injury.
A very niche community, but some of the most passionate sports fans in the world when it comes to them, when it comes to the Tour de France. And look, it is a great opportunity for him. And anytime we get to see a young Australian in the limelight like this, and also with a big team as well, I think it's definitely going to be a watch. And fingers crossed the young lad can step up.
Yeah, fingers crossed. Mathieu van der Poel, the Belgian-born Dutchman, still leads early days and will be one of the favourites for the Tour de France. And the good thing is it goes for a couple of weeks, so we might be able to talk a little bit more of that in the next couple of weeks as it continues on. While we're over on the European side of the globe, let's go and talk some Wimbledon. We don't have Christian Monaghan with us today, but look, when it comes to the senior draws, all the Aussies have bowed out. The Demon put up a really good fight in that first set against Novak Djokovic, had a chance to come back in the fourth set. His serve probably was left wanting a bit, but look, overall, a pretty solid tournament for the Aussies. Jordan Thompson's back injury. Daria Kasatkina would have been nice to see her go a little bit deeper, but not too bad apart from no quarterfinalists.
Yep, I look horrendous last night. I watched all that game and then also got dragged into the Sinner and Dimitrov match this morning too. And look, Demon come out of the blocks. It was windy, it was hot conditions, and he hit the ball so flat and really rattled Novak in that first set. And he's up 4-1 in that fourth set as well. And then Novak looked like he was just going to start swinging from the hip, and if he could get through a game, maybe break Demon back, and that's what happened. And unfortunately, it's not something that we've seen from Demon a lot. Usually when he does play these big hitters and these real top players, he just gets wiped off the court just with power. Unfortunately, last night, I think it was more the mental games came in and really affected him serving, and really he made so many unforced errors. I've never seen Alex play like that. He was chasing, doing all the things we know him for, but he made more unforced errors last night than I've ever seen him make against these top players. And if you took that to that fifth set, look, Novak was puffed. Who knows what might have happened, but unfortunately, I think he didn't lose that one physically. I think he just lost that one inside his own head, and it's going to be something he needs to figure out just to take that next step and hopefully be a consistent top 10 player.
Yeah, it was an interesting one. I was looking at some stats this morning from it, and it didn't surprise me when I saw that De Minaur won most of the rallies that were 1 to 4 strokes, and Djokovic had won most of the ones that were 5 to 8. De Minaur won 67% of the 9+ stroke rallies in that match, which is not a stat you often see against Novak Djokovic. And unfortunately for him, Novak was someone who worked out how to get back into it. You could see Novak was having trouble. Demon was doing well with the wind, using the wind to drop the ball in. But yeah, there was points there. But as you say, some unforced errors and uncharacteristically below average first serve just end up undoing him. And he had that chance in the fourth to try and take it to a fifth and fell away. So Novak Djokovic, though, absolute class. We know that. And look, he's going to have a chance now. And we'll talk Jannik Sinner. He's going to have a chance, as this draw starts to continue to open up, I guess. So Jannik Sinner did get through into the quarterfinals as well on that same side of the draw. So potentially a semi-final matchup with Novak Djokovic. Which we'll know essentially as this comes out. But this was heartbreaking. Grigor Dimitrov broke an ATP record or a professional tennis record that I don't think anyone wanted to break. He's the first person, Grand Slam history, to retire injured from 5 straight Grand Slams. And this one was probably the most heartbreaking, the most horrific. 2 sets to love up against the world number 1. Sinner had a fall early in the game and had to hurt his elbow. And it looks like he's torn his pec when he was on the cusp of finally delivering on this promise that he's had for so long. And he was starting to set himself up for a good run towards a semi-final. And look, Grigor Dimitrov is just a likable sort of character, the way he goes about his tennis. And you saw that. You saw Roger Federer in the stands. He was crestfallen and heartbroken for him. Dimitrov coming through was often referred to as baby fed in the early days. And even Jannik Sinner, he made the urgent move to get around because Dimitrov just collapsed and sat down on the court and was so crestfallen. It was heartbreaking to see. Even now, I'm getting goosebumps talking about it again. I just felt for the guy. He was on the cusp.
Yeah, Grigor Dimitrov, one of the nicest and most loved players by fans, by fellow players across the board, and it was so sad. And you could see, Roger Federer in the crowd. I think he was everyone's face. Everyone had the exact same face as Roger when we saw him go down, and even Jannik Sinner, he said after the game, "I don't count this as a win." And look, it was so sad to see. And yes, he's had that record of retirements, but they haven't been first rounds. They've been third round, fourth round, and a lot of the times that's because he's gone the distance and he just worked his body to the absolute core. And he's at that age now where he can't just hold up 5-setter after 5-setter after 5-setter. And it was so heartbreaking. He was playing some of the best tennis of his life, and on grass, it suits his game so much. It's just so sad to see. And fingers crossed it's a quick recovery and we can see him back down under in January.
Yeah, he's hoping. As you said, he's one of the great characters of the tennis world, so loved by so many of the players and so many of the fans. The hard thing is, like, each of them has been a different injury. I think it's only the fourth time in a Grand Slam that a male player has retired from 2 sets to love up, and all of the others were early rounds, non-consequential matches. This is against the world number one. As you said, he's been deep in these tournaments when it's happening. It is consistency with his body, and you've just got to feel for him a little bit. And again, it'll be what would have been, what could have been, and it's the cruelty of bodies breaking down. We saw Jordan Thompson. I'm still puzzled by Jordan Thompson continuing to play doubles when his back wasn't great. But anyway, that's Jordan Thompson being Jordan Thompson and trying to find more tennis because he's got something going on there where he just loves it. So sad pieces, but we wish Dimitrov all the best, and hopefully Yannick Sinner's elbow is good for this quarterfinal because we want to see him at his best. If we can get Sinner versus Djokovic into either Sinner or Djokovic versus Alcaraz, then that's going to be some box office tennis. We'll wait and see. Let's move on to the juniors. Cruz Hewitt, I was talking about it before, watched him in his first round match. It just looked like he's starting to get to that point of being a clone of his dad. We were talking about it sort of off air, and it must be hard for him to have that same sort of hustle and grind that Lleyton had. And I don't think he'll ever quite get to that same level because he's had a very different upbringing. Let's be realistic about this, but it's good to see him digging deep and getting into the second round and hopefully the third round as we go to air. Yeah,
look, Lleyton definitely grew up playing the back streets of Adelaide, and who could forget that as a 17-year-old, that famous win over, it might have even been 16, over Andre Agassi at Memorial Drive. But look, Cruz Hewitt finally starting to grow into his body. He's going to be a little bit bigger than Lleyton, as we can see, and probably a little bit more powerful. And look, we're seeing it now. You don't see many small players really on the tour. Even De Minaur, who looks small up against his other monsters, he's still 6 foot, and we see the way he moves across the court. So, look, it's a completely different game now, and fingers crossed Cruz Hewitt can really, over the next year or so, just take that next step. And we saw him last year at the Australian Open. He had a crack at the wild card for the seniors, and unfortunately he came up against the number 3 seed there in the wild card playoffs there. And look, I'd just love to see him spend a full year on the tour, even if he's playing challenges, just keep playing tennis. And that's where De Minaur really, he grew his craft on clay. He was living overseas and he just, for 2 years, just played challenges and worked his way up. And we're seeing it now. Some of the best tennis players don't hit their peak till 25, 26, and they've just played bulk tennis across every single surface. And I just love to see him over the next 2 or 3 years just keep up that grind. And if he can keep that up, then he can become anything because he's had that coaching. He's got a lot of tools, but he just needs to get more tennis into his game for me.
Yeah, he certainly does. He is the sole male representative for the Aussies in the boys' juniors. In the girls' juniors, through to the round of 16, we've got Talia Kokinis. She will come up against Minji Zhu, who we saw in the senior women's draw, went out in the first round, I think maybe to Emma Raducanu from memory in the All-British encounter. So that'll be interesting to see. That's going to be a big clash for Kokinis. Great for her to have got through to the round of 16. These are happening essentially as we're recording the night before this will release, so we'll know where they're up to. Then Emerson Jones, she got through to the last round of qualifiers, lost to Diane Parry, who's no easy beat. We saw her get through a couple of rounds in Wimbledon, but now she is through to the third round as well, the round of 16 in the juniors. So we'll be keeping an eye on them as well. We know Emerson Jones played in the main draw at the Australian Open, and she's certainly one to watch. And especially when you think that she only turned 17 this week, and this is already her second big tilt at a lot of these junior titles.
Yeah, look, the Australian junior tennis, especially across the girls' side, is in such a good place right now. Look, you just mentioned Kokinis, Jones, and let's not forget Maya Joint. And obviously her form over the last 6 months, she's the big riser in Australian tennis right now. So I think it's really showing that our girls' rankings, they really have the ability to play on the women's stage. We saw Emerson Jones in that first round at the Australian Open. how good she can compete. It's just about building that consistency across 3 sets, and it's something that you give one of the top 10, top 20 players even a look in. We saw Alex de Minaur the other night. You give some of the best players 5 minutes of tennis and they can blow you off the court. So it's just about building that consistency. And look, Maya Joint, Emerson Jones, Australian girls tennis is in a great place.
Certainly is. Maya Joint now knocking on the door. If she can get a couple of decent runs in the lead up to the US Open, she could be seeded at the US Open. She's ranked 36 in the world now, which is huge. That Eastbourne title win has done a lot for her. So that's a career high. And, she's starting to chase down, people like Anastasia Pavlichenko is only 6 ranking places in front of her live in the rankings, and she's into the quarterfinals of Wimbledon. So it gives you an idea that Maya Joint at just past 19 is absolutely on the surge, and one to watch. That backhand is absolutely a piece of art. So love watching her play in the women's game. And she's, I think she's probably the youngest player, if my numbers serve me correctly, outside of Mira Andreeva inside the top 40. So that's a pretty big tick against your name, isn't it?
Especially when Mira feels like she's a veteran, and we forget that she's only 17 because she's been in the top 30 for so long. And look, at the start of Wimbledon, I thought, I just want to see her just have a deep run, and she's doing that right now. So fingers crossed she can keep going.
Yep, certainly love seeing these young stars continuing to rise through, and there's a few more deep in the top 100 that are non-Aussie. So we'll keep watching them. We'll watch the juniors play out, and hopefully Emerson Jones can be lifting and join what an honour roll of the Wimbledon juniors, maybe Cruz Hewitt as well. That'd be something. But we might take a breather. We've got some cricket to get into, and then some AFL a little bit later. We've been around the grounds with Brody Burrows and the Third Man Up podcast. It's now time to take him down to the nets and see how he can school me with his guile and drift on that ball. Broads, there's plenty to talk about in the cricketing world, but where else would we start? But the Frank Worrell Trophy for a 14th straight series and 30 years consecutive, it's in Aussie hands.
It is, and for some reason, the bowlers once again saved our backsides, yet a bowler just can't seem to get their hands on the Man of the Match trophy. It's absolutely bizarre, isn't it?
Look, it's a batsman's sport, they say, even when they're not doing that well. Alex Carey, with a combined total of, I think, just under 100 runs, managed to get Man of the Match. Look, I think if one of the bowlers had maybe got, like 8 wickets, Nathan Lyon got 6, but he cleaned up the tail. So, yeah, maybe they should just not give it out a Man of the Match after this display over 3 and a bit days.
It was one of those performances, wasn't it, where you come in and obviously we've retained the trophy, but it's like, we come out of this looking worse than what we were when we actually went into this series. And look, there's more questions that have come out of these 2 wins than answers, unfortunately.
Yeah, there certainly is. And that's the thing, right, when you have a look at these results. And I don't know what to take from it, but certainly there hasn't been exactly convincing batting performances from either team, particularly over the 8 innings that we've seen. 80 runs have fallen at an average of 80 wickets have fallen at an average of about 21 runs. Like, it hasn't been a great series so far. And I hold some concerns when we head to a day-night test now with a pink ball in Jamaica. These West Indian pitches have shown that they're, let's just say, bowler friendly. And it's going to be a pink Dukes ball that Australia have never used before.
It's a really interesting one, because how long can Australia keep relying on the likes of Travis Head, Bo Webster, Alex Carey to get them out of trouble, and Steve Smith as well? But unfortunately, when the top order, they're just walking wickets right now, and they look lost, no feet movement whatsoever from the top order. And right now, if you're Travis Head, you've got the pads on before the first ball's even bowled, just ready. And even Bo Webster and Alex Carey, to a sense. Unfortunately, Sam Constas, we've talked about it, he just looks completely devoid of any confidence whatsoever. And I can't see a way that he's opening for Australia in the Ashes in, 6 months' time. I cannot see a way in a test series so important that he's opening for Australia.
Yeah, it's a puzzling one. Obviously, he hasn't shown a whole lot here. Even Usman Khawaja for mine, and mate, I am an unabashed Aussie fan, right? I just think they're both on the ropes. I think the only thing that's helping them is the fact that no Aussies are really playing, significant pink or red ball cricket at the moment. There's a chance for them to try and get some runs in the next match. But as I said, the fact that no one's really, knocking the door down is making it hard for them. That might be a different story after the Sheffield Shield season starts. But geez, I tell you what, if I'm Josh Inglis at the moment, I'm sitting there just going, give me the opening spot. Like, I can't do any worse than these blokes.
No, there's a few you can really feel for. I mean, McSweeney's another one. I mean, that day-night test at Adelaide Oval, he survived one of the toughest stints. It was Jasprit Bumrah at his hottest, and he was fiery. Him and Marnus, they were copping balls left, right and centre, and they just survived to T. Would you trust Sam Constance right now to go in under lights, one session to go, with some of England's best fast bowlers just absolutely fired up? There's just not enough grit right now. And that's one thing. And Uzi, we all know what he can do. Uzi at his best, but his feet movement he's playing at balls that Uzi previously would never play at, or he'd get over it and completely cover it. The best thing about Khawaja of the last 2 or 3 years is that front foot. He'd always get that front foot down the pitch, and the ball would hit him outside the line. It wouldn't even be an appeal. Whereas now he's getting stuck on the crease. We've seen that twice in the exact same way in the last test, unfortunately, that ball swinging in. So I'm really worried. I expect Uzi, I think, under lights, I reckon he'll actually do all right against this Duke's ball. But look, Sam Constance is the big question for me.
Yeah, I think there's a big asterisk on Sam Constance. I think he's caught between, he's almost in that Marnus Labuschagne problem of being caught between trying to play too defensive after everyone critiqued what his natural game was, in inverted commas. Like it's a real puzzle. It's a real challenge for him. And unfortunately for him, I think he's getting lots of different ideas and lots of different commentary from lots of places, and that's just making the confusion more ingrained in his brain. And I feel for him. I think the guy just needs to go back and play Sheffield Shield cricket for a year or two. And look, I don't doubt that there's an Australian opener in there. He's just not ready to come out of its shell yet.
I don't want to say this, but I think that Boxing Day innings where he was ramping Bumrah for fun, I think that was, looking back on it now, that could have been one of the worst things to happen for his career, because previously in the Sheffield Shield, this was a guy who would make 100 off 260, 270 balls. And he's come in, and obviously adrenaline must have been absolutely pumping, playing in front of 90,000 people for your first ever test. You don't know what you're doing. Like, you can't imagine anyone going out in your first test with that many people, arguably the best bowler in nearly all of the last decade coming in, steaming in right at you. And he's just doing this. I think he just lost his way, and he's completely, when he does go defensive, it's not your typical defense shots. It's stuck on the crease, just popping your hands out, which is, against fast bowlers, we've seen both Josephs just nick him up for fun, unfortunately, or he's playing at balls and chopping on. He just needs to go back, play some Sheffield Shield, and just bat time. Who cares if you make 30 off 150? Just go back and bat time.
Yeah, I agree. I think he needs to find that balance of getting confident in his stroke making, take some patience into it, and then work out when. I think the end game for Sam Constance, looking at what he delivers, is that he's going to be a batter who plays along, plays some periods of just seeing off the ball when he gets confident, and then can inject a few overs just to when a bowler's starting to get set and starting to take a couple of wickets maybe at the other end. He's that player that can then go and do what he did against Bumrah and just play 2 or 3 overs of that just to hit them out of the attack for a little while, and that will build to being a great opener. But again, it's that challenge we've got at the moment because we don't have lots of people bashing down the door, I guess. But we'll wait and see. He's got a third test here. Maybe he'll surprise us. I don't think he will. There's a few other areas for us to work on. There's certainly a lot of areas for the West Indies batting attack to work on. They've been very inconsistent. Their most dangerous batsman seems to be Shamar Joseph, who just likes to hit everyone out of the ground, which is absolutely terrifying. But he can't do it for very long. He doesn't have a lot of patience. On Australian batters scoring some runs, Australia A and Sri Lanka A are currently playing a couple of series in Darwin. They've got some one-dayers. But into the third game, as we're talking, probably the biggest talking point was the first game for the Aussies. The second game, they lost by 50-odd runs. And in that match, realistically, no one really stood out outside of a century from Matt Renshaw, 106 off 75 balls. In the first match, though, there was some really good bowling from Sam Elliott, the son of Matt Elliott, former Test player. We always love a second-generation player, especially when their name's not Marsh. It's okay, JR. I'm not advocating for any Marshes to get picked in any teams. But then in the batting innings, Jason Sanger, Matt Renshaw, 50, 80, Nathan McSweeney, 85 not out, and Oliver Peake, 55 not out. So there's some glimmers here of some Aussie promise, and obviously Matt Renshaw getting some runs. Doesn't matter what format it is. Fills me with some hope that maybe he's going to get back to some form this summer.
Yeah, it would be great. And Matt Renshaw batting at number 4 at the moment in both of those games. So look, it's going to be really interesting. I think, Jason Sanger, I'd love to see him come in and play 2-3 years ago on the canvas as a semi-professional cricketer. He's come back, recovered from injuries, and we saw what he did in that Sheffield Shield final last year. And he's the one, isn't he? I think he's always had that talent, and we saw it under 19 level when he captained Australia, and he's come through and he hasn't been able to play 2 or 3 years of consistent Sheffield Shield, which we see probably other than Sam Constance, all the batters we've brought into this Australian side over the last decade have all played a significant amount of Sheffield Shield and made bulk runs. And look, fingers crossed he can have another good year. But look, Nathan McSweeney, Matt Renshaw are probably the next two in for me. McSweeney, he's had experience at the top of the order already. Campbell Kellaway is another one you can sort of throw around, but don't really think he's ready at this stage. But I would love to see Reynolds get another go. And look, he's one that he can come in and just, he's a bit like Travis Head. When he does get the ball, he comes in and bowls those straight arm off spinners that don't seem to do anything and still manage to get wickets.
Yeah, look, he's an interesting addition. It'd be great to see, as I said, we've got the third game in progress nearly done while we're talking here. And then we head into 2 4-day matches. And I love that we're getting, and you look ahead at the schedule, there's more focus on this Australia A, getting some more long format games. I think we've got a tour maybe to India, maybe later in September as well. So, looking forward to that because we've got some 1 day and some 4-day matches as well over there. So a real focus on getting more red and pink ball cricket into these players, which they're severely lacking. We see windows of, they play 4 or 5 Sheffield Shield games and they have 3 months off and they play 4 or 5 Sheffield Shield games again and then you move on. I like this. Even our under-19s, I think, have got a 4-day match against India as well. Maybe 2 4-day games actually in September and October to be played in Brisbane and Mackay. So more red ball cricket for our young cricketers coming through, I think, can only be a good thing, especially playing against other countries.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, I think Bo Webster was that one who just played bulk Sheffield Shield for so long, and 3 or 4 years ago was really struggling, and then he's just found that sweet spot in age and maturity, and he's really come through, and he knows his game back to front. And we're now seeing him come in at the toughest times in international cricket as well. So big shout out to the slug from Snug, but look, the more cricket you play, we're seeing that often, and I think it's good, but I would love to see even Sam Constas at the moment relieve him of his duties. Go back to England. Just get some cricket in somewhere, mate. Go, just travel somewhere and play some cricket because he come in and just looks like he hasn't played cricket in 4 or 5 months. So sorry to bang on, but I think he just needs to just to find himself again.
Yeah, to be fair, I wouldn't mind seeing him then over on that tour to India. I know it's going to be different decks and stuff, but I just think getting some confidence, just playing more cricket, red ball
sessions.
Yeah, just get around it, get it happening, and develop it. But we'll wait and see. One last one before we go, and it was the very unexpected name, the new South African captain in his first test as captain of South Africa, Fiaan Mulder, who has peeled off the 5th highest test score of all time. And you might say, okay, that's interesting. 367 not out, declared against Zimbabwe in a test where South Africans have absolutely piled up runs. And he said, look, I didn't feel fitting of taking Brian Lara's record or a couple of those other records. Mentioned a few other pieces. That they had enough runs on the board. It's a selfless manoeuvre. The thing that I find astounding about this is a guy who in his 20th test, including these 367 runs, has 3 100s, 150 to his name, averages 26, and has only scored 786 runs. So by my maths, that means that he was averaging about 20 before this match.
Yes, I've just got his stats up here, Chris. So against Australia, averages 16.5. Against England, averages 8.5. India, 6.5. Pakistan, 19.33. Sri Lanka, 16.2. West Indies, 23.14. Zimbabwe, 265.5. So he definitely enjoys that. Certainly does.
So look, I take my hat off to him. It is a test match. He's got he's probably he's a better man than me because I would have been trying to bat on and I would have been trying to get 500 or 600 down the result. I would have been happy to take a draw if I set a record that no one's ever going to beat again.
Yeah, it's a real funny one, isn't it? I think it's great for what he did, and it's not. I don't think it's a stat that you'd want next to your name if 3 or 4 years down the track is who's that? Who's that guy in front of Brian Lara and Matty Hayden? But it's Zimbabwe at the moment. They're not that side that they were, in the early 2000s where they could really test and they wouldn't often beat those top sides, but they'd still be competitive. And we haven't seen that Zimbabwe for a long time. And look, South Africa and probably a second string South Africa beating them up. It's not something that you want to see in world cricket, especially when it's a margin like this.
No, you certainly don't. The one thing I did love is his post-match interview with Sean Pollock, where he's talking about the fact that he sings to himself in between deliveries just to keep himself focused. And they asked him, what does he sing? And he said, look, my last century, I was singing an Afrikaans song that not many people would know. But apparently in this one, he was singing Zombie by the Cranberries.
Oh, I'll tell you what's not in what's in his head, and that's any records. But look, I really, really, I find that weird when you think of all the songs you can sort of get in your head. Is that just because he was just like a zombie, wasn't caring, just running around without a care in the world, or what? But surely there's a better song than that.
I think you're reading too much into it, to be honest. I reckon it's just, the worm that he got on the way out there. But look, Mulder has now got the 5th highest score. He sits behind Brian Lara, Matthew Hayden, Brian Lara, and Mahela Jayawardena. So he will sit there in Test cricket history. Hopefully this is the spark of, we need to see the South Africans competitive. I know they won the World Test Championship, but we need to see them being competitive consistently against the best nations. So hopefully this is the start of something else in terms of, Vian Mulder, and he goes on and becomes a star like a Graham Smith or a Hashim Amla in their batting lineup for the next few years. We're looking forward to, I guess, seeing what he can do and what he can bring of it. He's only 27, so he's got quite a career in front of him potentially. So congratulations to him. I take nothing away from him. And I think it was very magnanimous of him to step down and declare before he put himself atop that list, and had a lot of questions asked if his career doesn't go onto those heights later on.
No, hit the nail on the head there, Chris. And very selfless act, because it looked like he was just scoring runs for fun there towards the end.
Certainly did. Well, let's go and put away the red kookaburra or the pink jukes, depending on where we're playing. We might grab some water and get out the Sharons for a little kick. What do you reckon, Broads?
Sounds good to me, mate.
Well, we move on from talking cricket and we're going to talk some AFL, and we'll keep on with Brody Burrows from the Third Man Up podcast. He's a cricket guru, he's an AFL guru, mate. You're doing some heavy hitting on this show.
Oh yeah, mate. Been across the country over the last few weeks, and mate, anytime we get to see Australia do well in the cricket, and not just that, but footy's starting to heat up to the business end of the season, just what we like to see as well.
Well, it's certainly on the run home, as we know, and there's lots to talk about with it. And I thought it's a good time as we're sort of, a month and a half out from the finals. We're starting to count down towards that September footy, or, figuring out how my team can get a number 1 draft pick if you're a North Melbourne fan. And let's do another buy, hold, sell. I thought this was a nice, clean way to sum it up last time. So let's talk through a few teams. And there's some teams that are outside of finals contention. We'll talk about finals contention in a moment as well, that I really want to have a look at. And the first of those is the West Coast Eagles, just 1 win to their name at the moment. Is there any glimmers of hope over in the West for the lowest ranked team on the ladder?
If you were to come into this year and say Richmond had won 2 games more than West Coast at this stage in the season, you would say it's an absolute disaster year for West Coast. And I don't think we can look at it as anything but, unfortunately, for West Coast Eagles. I mean, they've got so much young talent, but we've seen it. The writing's been on the wall for so long with the likes of Tim Kelly and so many other experienced players. They were always going to bottom out, but they just don't have that higher end talent now to help the likes of Harley Reid and these young stars coming through. And unfortunately, it's probably going to get worse before it gets better for the Eagles. And when you're not winning these games, you're also in danger of losing these young stars, as some of the Victorian clubs obviously starting to circle Harley Reid with monster offers too.
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting one. If they lose Harley Reid, it starts to become a bit of a game of dominoes, and how they start to fill the gaps in something that's already got as many holes as Swiss cheese, it feels like. I don't know if I dare ask this one, but let's go North Melbourne.
No, look, mate, if I'm North Melbourne, I think, unfortunately, they're just where they are for the last 6 or 7 years. They're competitive in some games. They give some top 4 teams a run for the money for 3 quarters, which we saw last weekend against the Western Bulldogs. But ultimately, we're just not seeing the growth. And everyone's saying, "Oh, North Melbourne will be, 2 years down the track, North Melbourne will be competing for finals." But haven't we been saying that for the last 3 years with North Melbourne? Unfortunately, they've had so much high-end draft picks. But when is that talent eventually going to turn into results? And I'm really worried for North Melbourne and Clarko right now too. We just need to start seeing results. Everyone, North Melbourne supporters, and I think the whole Australian, probably outside of maybe 1 or 2 clubs, want to see North Melbourne do well. The shin boners, the shin flacids on the weekend, we talked about that, but unfortunately, I just think we need results sooner rather than later. No more respectable losses for North Melbourne.
Is that a sell or a hold?
That's a sell. It's a sell for North Melbourne.
I'm just skipping up the ladder now. The next 4 teams I don't even want to talk about: St Kilda through Carlton. Let's go to Port Adelaide. Salt in the wound on the weekend. A few more key injuries. It just it's just starting to pile up for Port, unfortunately.
Yeah, it is. Look, they were very, very good in this game against Brisbane. Away from home against the reigning premier. losing 3 key players, the Sava Radigalia, centre half back, Vicentini in the ruck, and then Sam Powell-Pepper, who was arguably best on ground 2 half-time as well. And we know what he brings to that Port side. But I think what we really saw in that game was how important Jack Lukosius was for Port in that game. All of a sudden, it's not just Mitch Georgiadis up there, and they've got a 2-pronged attack up forward, and they all of a sudden look dangerous up forward. So it's a hold for me for Port Adelaide right now. It's not going to be their year. They're not going to make finals. But look, if I'm Josh Carr, I've got a little bit to work, well, at least work towards for next year.
Yeah, I agree on that one. What about Sydney? They knocked off your Dockers last week. I think there's some glimmers there, a bit like Port Adelaide, though. Finals probably not within their grasp.
Finals not in their grasp, but I'm definitely buying into this Sydney Swan side. I mean, you see just the return of Errol Goulden into the midfield, frees up Isaac Heaney a little bit. Papley come back, unfortunately, did his, I think he's going to be out for 2 or 3 weeks. Joel Amati out for the season, but they're just starting to get some of their prime movers back. And then you get these stars back in and they just look back to that top 4 side that we've seen at the end of last year. And for me, I'm definitely buying Sydney, and I expect them to be at least returning to the top 8 next year.
Watch this space for the Swannies and the red and the white resurgence. Let's move up a few more spots. Let's go to the Western Bulldogs. I think on paper, this side, as you talked about before, should be a top 4 contender. They've had a couple of bumps, which means they're sitting in 6th at the moment, but with a good percentage, they're still in striking distance.
Yeah, we saw on the weekend, North Melbourne took it up to them for 3 quarters, but then when the whip started cracking, I mean, they just banged on goal after goal after goal. And we've seen this with the Western Bulldogs. They're like the Harlem Globetrotters, especially at Marvel Stadium. They can get the ball flicking around and they can score heavily. They can score quickly. And I think Champion Data has the Western Bulldogs with 4 of the top 5 players in the competition right now. Ed Richards has just brought a completely different game style with his ability to distribute effectively. And when you've got Bont, Ed Richards, Libba too. I mean, what a game in his 250th as well. The heart and soul of that club, and then just a unicorn, Sam Darcy. It's a scary proposition for any side. I'm definitely buying the Western Bulldogs.
I think it's really just the case for the Dogs of getting all of those to gel at full tilt, or at least a B grade mark each week. If they do that, they're going to go a long way, and they could actually lift another title, in my opinion. Let's talk about the team sitting just above them. Hawthorn, percentage of concern when you look at the teams around them. They need to keep winning if they want to be a top 4 side.
Look, for Hawthorn, for me, I'm going to hold, but I wouldn't be surprised for them to be one of the sides in contention for missing the 8. I think there's 3 at the moment that will probably miss the 8. That could miss the 8, and that is GWS, Fremantle, and Hawthorn. And look, it's a huge game this weekend between Fremantle and the Hawks, and I think whoever loses that will miss out on the 8. And we've seen it so much this year. They're relying on Jack Gunston, one of the oldest blokes in the team, to get them out of trouble. Whenever those tight games happen, it's usually Jack Gunston who'll kick 2 or 3 goals in a quarter, and we do know he's getting on, but they just need more. Yes, we saw Mitch Lewis return last week as well. Are you going to bring someone like Mitch Lewis in coming off a knee, or are you just going to let him play out the year in the VFL? For me, I think they're a hold. I'm not completely sold on the Hollywood Hawks right now.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. Hawthorn, one of their arch nemesis is the Geelong Cats, and certainly when you have a look at the run home for Geelong, they've got Richmond, they've got Essendon, they've got a depleted Port Adelaide, they've got North Melbourne, St Kilda. The Giants and the Swans, they're probably 2 toughest games. The Giants, the only team, I think, inside the top 8 that they'll play. If they don't make top 4 and possibly even top 2 the way it sits, it's probably a bit of a disappointing finish to the regular season for them.
Is that for the Cats?
It's Geelong, yeah.
Yeah, for the Cats. I think you could tell halfway throughout the year, everyone talked about, Geelong seemed to have an easy draw, but then you look at their run home and they did really well against some of the best sides, and they were dropping games like the game that they lost against St Kilda, against GWS at home. They were dropping games that they shouldn't, but then they were beating the teams above them on the ladder, and just sets up this, you don't want to say easy run home because anything could happen. But I think what it's going to allow is it's going to allow them to rest those veterans to come in fresh, the likes of Patrick Dangerfield, the likes of Jeremy Cameron. I mean, he's probably going to be that far ahead in the Coleman. He can afford to miss at least 1 or 2 of these games. And a fresh Geelong, we've seen it time and time again. They do it better than anyone on looking after their players. Bailey Smith, another one who hasn't played for the last few weeks. So Geelong, for me, I think they'll finish top 2. And at this point in the season, they're my premiership tip.
There you go. You've heard it here first. A lot of people's premiership tip is the team in the horizontal black and white. It is the Collingwood Magpies. They're sitting almost, well, it's 2.5 games clear at the moment at the top of the ladder, but their run home is a very different one when you have a look at some of the teams they've got to play. Yes, they've got Richmond in that run, but they've also got, Brisbane, Adelaide, they've got Hawthorn in that run, which, we talked about. They've got Fremantle who can play spoilers, Gold Coast as well.
Yeah, look, I think there's two ways to look at this. Are they going to be going into finals fresh, or are they going to be coming into finals really battle hardened? And it really depends on how they're going to play this last half of the season out. And we've seen Collingwood have done it so good is what they do, the amount of players they have had go through their side this year and immediately come in and look like stars. And you compare that to Carlton at the moment is Carlton are having some players come in and they look like they'd struggle to get a kick in the twos, where Collingwood are bringing in mid-season draftees, been at the club for barely a month, and they're coming in and looking like they've been at that club for 2 years. And it just goes to show when you've got a great structure and everyone knows what they're doing. I just love the way Collingwood go about it, from the back pocket to the forward lines, the bench, all the coaching staff. It just seems like everyone at that footy club is on the same page. So Collingwood and Geelong, give us that grand final, please.
Oh, Collingwood are 8 in a row. The last loss was to Geelong by 3 points way back in May. So they've only dropped 2 games this season, and one of them was against Geelong. I think that would be a mouth-watering final. There's a lot of fans that would be anti those two teams playing in a grand final, but that's okay. Look, if it's not going to be North, it may as well be those two. Well, bros, that's the interesting piece, and you've led into the next piece perfectly. You talked about those teams that could miss finals. We've realistically got a bunch of teams from Adelaide in third to Fremantle in ninth, separated by 4 points. Yes, there's some significant variance amongst the percentages and different things that may help. We've got all of these teams, all 7 of them, fighting for 6 spots.
It's absolutely crazy, but it sets up such a good run home and a really good round for this weekend, where last week we saw the top 9 versus the bottom 9. This week, the top 9 just about play each other, which is fantastic for the run home. And I think the biggest game of the week immediately is that Fremantle Hawthorn. I mean, both of these sides don't have an easy run home, so a loss here is just going to make it so hard. And look, it really just... if Justin Longmuir doesn't get this Freo side, which is loaded with talent and everyone's talked about, if he doesn't get them into finals, what's going to happen? Because he doesn't have that contract beyond this year. And I think there's going to be so many questions about Justin Longmuir, and with so many great coaches now who have either finished up with a club and entered the media now really open, does that really start to put pressure on him? I'm worried that if he doesn't make finals, if Freo don't make finals, he's gone for me. So...
Yeah, you've got to be nervous. And as you said, some of those games that they have coming up, like, yes, they've kind of got a remaining handful of games where they're either playing the top few, and mostly the top few, and then a couple of games that are must win. But they also need to spring a couple of those upsets, because realistically, they probably need to win 3, maybe 4, realistically with their percentage. I would say 4 to be confident of making finals.
Yeah, it's a really, really weird one on the run home. And look, Western Bulldogs, we've seen them at their best is probably close to one of the best in the competition. And we've seen them at their worst as a far different team. But they've also got West Coast, a chance at a percentage boost. But look, we saw on the weekend, Caleb Sarong get shut down. James Jordan did an absolutely outstanding job on him. And they just lacked any drive from the midfield. They're desperate for Hayden Young to come in. He's just like Ed Richards is for the Bulldogs, where he can come in, provide great ball use throughout the middle, can also drift up forward, similar to like a Jordan Dawson with his height. So Freo need him back in that team ASAP. But look, whoever loses out of them and Hawks this weekend will miss the 8, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think that's going to be an interesting one. So there's who's missing the 8. What's the makeup? I'm assuming Collingwood you've got locking in, probably minor premiers still. It's going to be hard for them to slip from there.
Yeah, so I've got Collingwood, Geelong, Brisbane and Adelaide rounding out the top 4 so far this year. Then after that, Western Bulldogs, Gold Coast Suns, GWS and Fremantle. So I've actually got Hawthorn missing on the run home, just with their tough run. But we've all seen Hawthorn, when they do get a run on, they are one of the hardest teams in the competition to stop, but they just don't seem to have that momentum like they did in the last half last year.
I think it'll be a great story. The Gold Coast making the finals finally. It seems long overdue. I'm intrigued. Adelaide and the Bulldogs this week. I think if the Bulldogs could get a win there and kick strongly and maybe just close that percentage gap, that could come right down to it in terms of those two fighting when you look at their 2 draws for the final spot in the top 4. But yeah, I'm pretty much with you on that. Collingwood too much of a start now. I think they'll be able to cruise through and head into those last couple of tough games, including Brisbane, probably with a bit of buffer in it. And it realistically, the result, they want momentum, but the result won't matter too much. We've talked a lot about teams, bros, before we wrap up the AFL and your massive input for this week's show. Let's talk about the Brownlow and just some star performers. You talked about, the champion data pieces and the Western Bulldogs having 4 stars. The unique thing, well, it's not unique, but the key thing about medals like the Brownlow and the Dally M is if you're in a good team that's performing well and you've got a lot of good players, you steal votes from each other and it cruels you. So here, have we got someone from one of those more mid-table teams or is there someone, is it just going to be a day cost? What are we going to see?
Look, I've got a tracker that we do each week on the podcast, and look, it's been a battle between 3 for just about the whole season, but we're getting a really late charge from someone else. So equal top at the moment on 19 votes. I've got a race of 3 in Nick Dacos, Jordan Dawson, and Bailey Smith. Now, another player who's absolutely come from the clouds with 9 votes from his last 4 games is Noah Anderson from the Gold Coast Suns, and he's only 1 vote behind him, and he got a lot of ones early in the year where Matt Rao, he got 3s. Tuke Miller got a few 3s, and Ben Long also got a couple. But we've seen it before. Once you appear on Brownlow night and you go close, the umpires really start noticing you for the next year. It's like you need 1 solid year before the umpires start to take notice. I mean, we saw that a few years ago with Nick Dacos. We've seen it with a lot. I think Jordan Dawson will poll really, really well this year as well. And Bailey Smith, we all know you can't not watch Bailey Smith whenever he plays. So they're my top 4 at the moment. But I think if you're looking for a real roughie or someone just to finish top 5, Hugh McCluggage from the Brisbane Lions. He's been easily the Lions' best player for the year. I've got him on 16 votes, so only 3 behind, and he's currently at 51 odds. So for me, he's my roughie, or I think he's a shoe-in for at least a top 10 finish.
Well, there you go. You've gone from top 5 to top 10. You're hedging your bets pretty quickly, but it looks like when you look at those betting markets that Noah Anderson, he's been the big market mover if you want to talk about that. So it's certainly interesting to see. From a rising star point of view, all eyes are still on Levi Ashcroft, I think.
Yeah, it is. But I think there's been 2 other standouts. Look, Murphy Reid, for me, if you're talking about the most damaging young player in the competition, I think he's easily the most damaging. He's Fremantle's best kick inside 50, and I think he's the 3rd best kick in the AFL going inside 50, which results in scoring shots. So for a player to come in and immediately do that, I think that's absolutely huge. But look, Archie Roberts from Essendon, he's doing nearly what Levi Ashcroft is doing, but in a far worse side. So whether the judges are going to take that in when it comes to it, but I think it's a race between 3. It's definitely Levi Ashcroft, Archie Roberts, and Murphy Reid for me, and it's really funny. I think it'll be a lot closer than what many are expecting, but I still expect young Levi to come home with a rising star.
And then in terms of the other big medal in the AFL, we can probably close the books on Jezza Cameron at this point, surely.
Especially with Geelong's run home. I mean, he could have put it to bed on the weekend. It was a little bit inaccurate, which is something you don't see from him very often, but look, you just love the way Jezza goes about it. He gets on the mic and he talks after, and he just sounds like a bloke who's come out of country footy and just he's a farmer who does part-time football, not the other way around. And now, look, it's great to see Jeremy Cameron back. We saw early in the year when Patrick Dangerfield was up there, he was playing more of a second fiddle, and Dangerfield was probably more of a key forward. And now that Dangerfield's playing that hybrid forward flank sort of a role, Jezza Cameron's just going back to his goal-kicking best. And I still think at full flight, he is the best player in the competition. So look out if he does start to hit his straps and really get up the field like we've seen him do, and where he gets at 23, 24 possessions and 4 or 5 goals in the same game.
Oh, there you have it. There's all the pieces to watch for over the run home as we head into finals. Undoubtedly, Broads, we might get yourself on, and I think we're going to try and, depending the great men's availability, maybe leverage your other mate who's massive forearms we can see there during the final series, maybe in the lead up to the grand final for a bit of a preview.
Yeah, I've unfortunately got a bit of a bet going with Spy that if Fremantle don't make the finals this year, I've got to peroxide my hair like St Kilda Spider and come as him for Mad Monday. So fingers crossed, Fremantle make the finals. Otherwise, I'm going to be looking like Jack Ginnivan there.
I'm going to say, mate, I'm thinking more Jason Ackermanis because, mate, you need to work on those pipes if you're going to be Spider.
I think so.
A big thank you, Brody Burrows. If you want more on AFL and much, much more, check out Brody and Spider on the Third Man Up podcast. Well, it's time to move from the Aussie rules to the F1 track. And when we talk F1, we bring in our producer and motorsport extraordinaire, JR Carter. JR, I was going to say welcome to the show, but you already made a nice little cameo talking Terry Crews and all things movies that are stranger than fiction but true.
Yeah, look, there's a lot of truth coming out of that movie in the recent years, but like that's not what we're here to talk about. We're here to talk about what happened in Silverstone and what a race it was. It is just no great secret that Oscar was absolutely robbed. The 10-second penalty for breaking behind the safety car, which was like he broke as the safety car broke, like put its lights off. Like there wasn't too much he could really do. Max obviously flew up beside him, and then that actually also ended Max's race effectively. Like Max was just never able to sort of recover from that moment either. But it did give Lando a win, but at the same time, like it's pretty hollow win. Lando didn't really have a lot to do with it. Like if Oscar had been left to his own devices, hadn't got the penalty, he would just flown away home.
Yeah, it was an interesting one, as you say. Piastri talked about it, saying he didn't get the result he deserved. Max Verstappen was quoted as saying he was, quite surprised by the penalty. The only person that seemed to be in favour of the penalty was his teammate. However, McLaren also came out and explained why the team didn't swap its driver after he took the 10-second penalty as well. Just sort of suggesting that it was basically his own action. So, I think the quote was, as part of the way they go racing as a team, they tell the drivers, don't keep things in the back of your mind when you drive. If you have a suggestion, let us know, but we'll make a decision on that. So they came back to him and said, basically, no, too bad, so sad. And Lando gets some more points, tightens the gap back up, and, the rivalry will not dissipate.
No, I think coming into these next couple of races before the summer break, like we're going to see Oscar pick back up. Like he was in fine form. Like he was just build and build throughout the sessions over the course of the weekend, where he wasn't the fastest to start with, but he was certainly getting very, very close each moment.
Yeah, well, we saw sort of almost the angry side of him starting to come out, and I think that's going to spell some fireworks between he and Lando over the coming races.
Look, we've got our list. I don't have it available for us right now, but like we are going to possibly see Lando sort of look a little bit better after the summer break, but then just mathematically just not be a chance. So.
Yeah, well, I mean, Martin Brundle talked about it. He sort of said about a cheeky side of of Oscar's personality. After he sort of made that request to swap places. And, hey, it was worth a shot. But, look, the Drivers' Championship Showdown is almost fated now to be those two, and there's going to be some fireworks. Oscar's been such a calm and composed sort of participant so far, but I think with this is going to irk him a little bit, so it's going to be interesting to see. But the bigger talking point, I think, bigger than this penalty was, and I was talking to you before, after watching back through the race, and, I kind of glimpsed away for a few things that I was doing, and then I looked back as the podium presentation was going on, and I thought I was seeing things. I thought it was April Fool's Day. Nico Hulkenberg was on the podium. How did a Kick Sauber get on the podium?
The Kick Sauber got on the podium by good strategy, and the other reason the Kick Sauber got on the podium was due to poor strategy on Ferrari's part, where Lewis was on the wrong tyre at the wrong time, and that Sauber just blasted past him. It was an interesting sight to see that the absolute tractor of a Sauber. And just here's a good example of sort of what's going to happen in the years to come of Hulk explaining to his grandkids, how did he get a podium from 19th for that matter as well. Like he wasn't he didn't qualify particularly well. He was starting at 19th. So what a bloke. Like it's been 15 years coming. It's his first podium in Formula One the entire time he's been running. He's scored like that Sauber team has scored more points than the Red Bull team at the moment. And in this one race, he scored more points than Sauber scored last year. So like good things are happening. I remember saying a couple of weeks ago that like these Saubers are doing some stuff. Maybe maybe they're a team to watch for the rest of the season.
Yeah, potentially. Look, I'm not going to pin the value of my house on that, but we'll wait and see. Maybe Hulkenberg can throw a few surprises and some different things there. When you say the Saubers, you're obviously talking about Nico, right? Not Bortoletto.
No, Bortoletto's actually had a couple of points recently as well. So like maybe for that matter, to be honest, like in terms of the rookies, he's not the worst of the rookies at this stage, I don't think. So like he's actually shown a few things a couple of times. Like Lawson is obviously the worst of the rookies. Just make no mistake there.
Yeah, well, Lawson's on the ropes. Colapinto's on the ropes. We might talk about those two in a moment. There were some other surprising finishes here. Lance Stroll somehow managed to finish a race in itself, but the fact that he finished in the top 7 was quite bizarre as well.
Yeah, look, I think it's just a matter of like drivers just got out of his way because they were concerned about getting like crashed into in a wet race. Because like, let's be honest, I don't think Lance Stroll knows how he got to that position either.
No, certainly not. It's a bizarre one. Let's move on to the next of our topics. And motorsport, or the Matrix is what I'm calling this. Cadillac are really going out all guns blazing. They've announced they're going to have a docuseries behind their first season and the build up to it. And who else would you get to host and narrate this than Keanu Reeves?
Look, it's not a bad choice actually. Like, Keanu's been a motorsport enthusiast for like as long as like we sort of can remember. Like he's been in the sort of public eye, and he's a great host in those sorts of things. Like in terms of like documentary side of things, like I don't think he'll just be there like as a token host. I think he'll be really researching the topics. So like it'll be a really great thing to see. Will I watch it? I'm not sure. We'll see where we get to.
That's not about Keanu Reeves though. That's just about you don't watch a lot of these things. But if memory serves, he did a couple of years ago. He did a docu series for around the Impossible Brawn F1 journey, and that year that they won. So again, you know, as you said, he is a motorsport aficionado. He does like his motorsport, and it ties in well. You know, they want to draw eyes to America and continue to build this as the American team, the Cadillac team. So it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, absolutely does. And like he brings a bit of that Hollywood clout. Like I don't doubt there'll be like a lot of guests coming through here. What I'd really like to know about Cadillac right now is who is the two drivers going in those seats? Like, are we waiting for this documentary to find that out?
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting one. They had some more meetings. There's more rumors, but it's all rumors, innuendo, and no one's quite sure. There's quite a lot of movement around seats, and that probably nicely ties us to our final talking point around the F1 today. And we've got a couple of weeks now, sort of 2.5 weeks almost before the next race. And then we've got back-to-back races. This is a bit of a window, and we talked about this last week in the lead up to Silverstone, where I really think that Franco Colapinto is walking around with one of those red laser dots pointed between his eyes.
I think Colapinto's gone, to be perfectly honest. Like, I don't think we'll see him at the next race. The real question is like who goes back into that seat. Like there's talk that Jack Doohan goes back into the seat. There's all this talk that they're going to try and get Valtteri Bottas, whereas I think Valtteri's just holding out for a Cadillac deal and like would probably prefer not to drive a tractor around for the rest of the season.
Yeah, well, I can completely understand that he doesn't want to be tied to that, but again, it might be about getting his brand out there. It's an interesting one. The other one is Filip Drugovich, who I think is the Aston Martin reserve driver. Yet to make his F1 Grand Prix debut. I just don't understand why anyone would want to tie themselves to Flavio Briatore right now. Like we've made our feelings on this man very clear. The bloke's like a pothole. He's someone to avoid.
That's right. And look, here's the question. Like we keep talking about like the 11th team and like the 22nd car. Like, are we at a point like where just Alpine is just going so bad that we go back to 2020 teams within 2 years anyway? Like, is that where we're heading? Yeah,
it's an interesting one. Look, if anyone can crash and burn a team, it's Flavio Briatore. We know that much. He is let's not rehash old words.
Yeah, we might have to do like a CMS special just in regard, like a full expose one of these days.
Yeah, like those the sports shows on Netflix, Untold, Flavio Briatore. I'm open to interviewing some of these ex partners. I think that'd be great. I might have to go and get face to face with some of these supermodels.
That's not a bad plan at all.
Well, we know, as I said, that there's a little bit of a break. There'll undoubtedly be some twists and turns. There'll be some more rumour and innuendo about some of these open seats. We know there's moves potentially afoot at Mercedes and some others, JR, but we'll watch and wait with bated breath. If we have news, we'll make sure to drop it for you in our weekly shows. But in the meantime, we might put our feet up after the F1. I've got some rugby league to catch up with the great and powerful Matty Willoughby.
So some breaking news out of Milton Keynes overnight where we've had Christian Horner sensationally sacked from Red Bull. There'll be more details to come on this in next week's show, but at this stage the question is, was he sacked to keep Max or was he sacked because Max has already gone?
Well, moving on from the Formula One, it is time to talk some State of Origin. Game 3 is in the rear vision mirror, and unfortunately, as you can well and truly tell, because I don't have my New South Wales Blues jersey on, it is not a happy time for Blues fans despite leading the series 1-0 after the first game. We bring in our rugby league guru, Matt Willoughby, to talk all things Origin. Matty, a little bit of a somber morning this morning.
Yeah, thanks for having me again, Chris. It certainly is. I mean, certainly seems like things have changed since the few of the other times we've spoken over the last couple of weeks. Billy Slater has coached the arse out of Queensland here, and he's really shown up Laurie Daly as far as I can tell.
Yeah, look, I'm not one to lavish praise on Queenslanders or talk about the wonderful narratives, but you have to say, after everything that Cam Munster went through, losing his dad in the week leading up, it was always a potential outcome and a likely outcome. And we know how Queensland do rally, that they were going to put in a fairly stellar performance. But interestingly, it was a game when you look statistically that New South Wales probably weren't that dominated by, but watching on the eye test, Queensland looked far better and certainly stepped up to the mark.
Yeah, I mean the Cam Munster thing. It's obviously very sad to lose your dad in those circumstances. But I sort of think if there was a player who'd be able to come through it pretty resiliently, it would be Cam. Just that sort of personality that he has, and you can see that. He held it all in, and after the game, then he let it come out a little bit, which was fair enough. But I do think. It was a weird game. I do agree, and the thing that lost it for New South Wales was the one percenters, the extra efforts, the moving back, the following support runners, the making an extra tackle. Like, I mean, you can sum up the game in a couple of things, that it's Tom Dearden's cover defence probably more than anything, and some errors. New South Wales looked dominant for the first 3 minutes, and then Jerome Luai kicked a disgusting ball for a 7-tackle set, and that seemed to drift away after that. Nathan and Isaiah, they sort of looked tired. Even Dylan Edwards looked a bit tired. It looks like maybe they're a bit drained from having to chase things so hard at the back end for Penrith. But Nathan wasn't good and didn't play that well, but. Queensland directed a lot of traffic at him. He was gassed. I think, I'm not sure the final number, but he was up 35 to 40 tackles, and you could even see at points Cam Munster pointing at him, saying, "Yeah, there's our man. Go at him again," and that really worked. It was a great tactic.
Yeah, it certainly did. And to be fair, and I know there's a few people that shared this. Look, I still don't think that Nathan Cleary is still at 100%. It just didn't look on top of that he was quite at that full fitness. He wasn't goal kicking either. We saw that when we did get our very limited opportunities, and it's probably a little ironic that this was the actual game where Zach Lomax found his kicking range.
Yeah, no, I think there's no question he's definitely not fit. I would say he'll probably tell you 90. I reckon he's probably 75%, 80% fit. He's just not pushing off. Like, there were some gaps and some opportunities, but he's just not pushing into probably as hard and directly as he had. You look back on those big games, especially maybe the Broncos grand final, where he really chased that game, and you sort of thought in the second half he might try and do that, but I'm not sure his body was there for him, unfortunately.
No, it certainly wasn't. And as you said, hats off to Dearden, Munster, some of the efforts they made. There's a couple of times there. Dearden was obviously a leading contender, but when New South Wales looked certain to score, there was the Angus Crichton one, and then just last gasp pieces of defence that, New South Wales has been, really good at when they've been in games, but Queensland just took it to another level last night. There was 2 or 3 of them. And then you see the opposite side of that where, Harry Grant managed to weasel his way through what looked like about 7 New South Wales defenders, twisting, turning, and just reaching out, despite the fact that nearly every one of those defenders should have been bigger and stronger than him around those goalposts.
Yeah, I mean, that's a try you're disappointed to let in at the NRL level. So you certainly are at New South at State of Origin level. So yeah, definitely agree there. But yeah, the Queensland, every time Queensland made a break, they seemed to, there was no defenders coming from the inside. There was more support men than there were New South Wales bodies, and there was some soft tries really. That one down the wing, that should have been finished. Well, he should have been tackled, but he got the ball away, and then there was just no support or anything from there. So, these are not real characteristic defensive and 1% players you expect. I mean, the other thing for me, I mean, you were at the game. The crowd was huge, 82,000 by all reports. They seem to go flat pretty quick from far as I could see on TV.
Yeah, it's certainly, I think, to be fair, that kick from Jerome Luai that you talked on, that was the first of it. And, Queensland just were resilient. We could, New South Wales was struggling to get past the attacking 40-metre line. And the crowd just was never really into it. I think the most enthusiastic the crowd got was baking Ashley Klein a couple of times. And, I've seen a lot of people come out on social media since and sort of, done some drive-bys on Ashley Klein. But at the end of the day, I don't think any officiating made any real difference in that game. And, it was probably the least impactful officiating display from the 3. So, it's an interesting one, as you say. Yeah, it was a big crowd. It was a lot of blue jerseys too. Normally, you'd probably see 15, 20% of Queensland jerseys. I would estimate that was closer to probably 7 to 10% last night. It was an interesting one, but yeah, I think it probably turns the question now. And I went out on a limb just to try and do a little bit of fishing on my personal social media last night and put up a way too early 2026 team, which got some bites, which was interesting. And my two that I think I guess takeaways was we need to pick a side on form. We're picking a lot of these Penrith players who went in not necessarily in form, backed on the form of the last 4 years. Or 5 years, and that might be the question that we need to look at. There wasn't a high representation of Canberra or Bulldogs players, teams that are in form, and I know Jacob Preston was one that would have probably been in the mix had he not got injured a little while ago. And there's a few of these players though, and I think it might be a bit of a question certainly around some of the players in the spine as we go forward. And you and I talked about it after game 2. Geez, Isaiah Katoa, if he continues on any sort of trajectory he's on, he's almost got to be there with a bullet point. And I think there's also got to be some consideration if he can continue the form for Ryan Pappenheisen as well.
Yeah, with regards, we'll start with Jerome. I mean, to his credit, in the second half, I thought he played a lot better and started creating a bit more and was possibly more dangerous than Nathan on the left side in the second half. But for me, his kicking game's not up to it. They need two really strong kicking games. Nathan on the right side, Nathan on the right side, and someone on the left. So for me, I can't see Jerome being around next year. I think it's either got to be Mitch Moses returns, or Isaiah Katoa gets blooded. I'd say they'll probably go with Mitch Moses if he's back to fitness. But I think Katoa will be in around the squad the whole way through next year. So I just think the dual kicking games is a massive thing that's let them down, and we've seen from the Tigers, Luai's kicking game has not been up to it, and he sort of was able to rely on mainly Nathan in club football prior to this, so I think that's an area he needs to work on. But also from game 1, I think it's been underestimated the loss of the two Mitches, which is Moses and then obviously Barnett. Mitch Barnett was awesome in game 1, and they never really managed to find a replacement properly for that. For me, I think they missed the kick a bit with starting Max King. I don't. In 3 games, Spencer Lanu came onto the field when the game was pretty much over 3 times. I think the blueprint was what Billy did last night with Papali'i. Start Spencer Lanu, say go absolutely ballistic for 15 minutes, start the game, and then we'll bring you off and we'll bring someone like Max King on who can then grind away for the next 20, 25 minutes till halftime. And then you get that real impact, that real start from your forward pack. And I think we after we lost Barnett, we lacked that as a someone to work with Payne Haas. So I think there's some issues around there. The hooker's an interesting one because Reece Robson had made 40-odd tackles up to halftime, and Joey in commentary made an interesting comment. He said, how good he's made 40 tackles, but then he goes, but they all do, as in hookers all make those tackles. That's, their role is to get in and make 40 tackles or make as many tackles as need be through the middle. So is there an issue with what he's producing on the other side of the ball? And, I think there is. I think you've got guys like Connor Watson. I don't think they would go back to Arpey, but Brayley at the Sharks, I think when he's running games on song, he can offer a bit more as well. So I just think perhaps that they were missing a little bit from dummy half.
I went a little bit left field when I looked at it. I did suggest starting Watson and bringing maybe a Wade Egan onto the bench who can play in a couple of other roles as well. I think he's been good at the Warriors. He's probably the forgotten man. I know his coach will sing his praises as they all do, but I think if you go that way, it also gives you some more versatility on the bench. But yeah, I think the hooker piece is interesting. I think on the front row, I was actually sitting there last night wondering, basically when they made that Papali'i change and New South Wales was clearly on the back foot, was whether or not that needed to be, because Payne Haas was playing essentially a lone hand trying to cart the ball up. Inject Spencer and I get you come in with a game plan, but as Mike Tyson says, everyone's got a game. Everyone's got a plan to get punched in the face, and New South Wales were clearly getting punched in the face repeatedly at that point.
No, I agree, and they they seem to have this set routine that they had with Lenu, and they never thought to change it at any point. So I think he was wasted, and what he could do was wasted in the game. I don't think he's a guy who's going to give you, 20, 25, 30 minutes. Like, you need to get that impact out of him. And the rotations these days, players like Payne Haas are playing 60, 65 minutes. I got a guy like Terrell May who has forgotten about playing 60, 70 minutes a game. You can afford to carry a bloke or two on the bench. You're only going to play 15, 20 minutes. It's not really an issue in the way that the game's played these days. So, that was an issue. And like, I think, you can call it a bit of Tigers' bad blood, but I think Stefano's just a little overrated. I'm not sure he does enough for his club to gain this automatic selection into the New South Wales team. I just don't really get it, and I didn't get it at the Tigers either. I didn't think he was that great at the Tigers either. So
I thought he was okay last time, but okay, he's not Origin, and I would much rather have seen a Terrell May or even a Keelan Kolomatangi, who has been playing a bit of a lone hand in a pretty average South side at the moment. So it's certainly going to be lots of questions a long time around before we get back to it. The last questions for you, obviously Billy will be lauded, and hindsight's a wonderful thing about his dropping of Daly Cherry Evans. Do you think it was coaching masterstroke, a little bit of good fortune? And then on the other side of that, how much pressure is Laurie Daly under?
Well, I think with Billy, one of the chats we've had, I sort of wrote him off, so I've got to give credit where it's due.
A bit of humble pie, Matty.
Yeah, no, I've got to, and I don't usually like it, so I will. But I think it was a Queensland career-defining move to sack Cherry Evans after the first game, and he's come through with flying colours. I think Dearden was the best player on the field last night by a country mile, and it wasn't just the 1% stuff. It was the other things he did as well, the leadership, the kicking game. So, full credit to Billy in that regard. I reckon he wanted Papali, but he was happy just to save him for the last game. And then also Trent Liero, I was pretty damning with him, and I thought he had a really strong, really good game last night as well.
Yeah, I think there's a few players that have made their certainly their name for Origin now, and Trent Liero was one. I thought it was a little weird when he was the one that was kept over Fermor, but anyway, again, the ends justify the means, and Queensland looking good. So does Laurie Daly survive this Origin off season?
Yeah, well, it's a really strange one because I don't see the succession plan. I don't know who's next in the line. Like, if you're not picking club coaches, I'm not sure who's there and available to come in and take his place. I think they will give him another year, and I think maybe then they'll try and develop someone like a Matt King or someone like that, who or even there's a Raiders guy, Brett White, yeah, one of those guys to develop them through to be the coach. But I really don't see the other options. But I do think he was pretty naive. You can get carried away with that first game win, and then, hindsight, it was always going to judge whoever lost. But it did having so many players not fit for the training sessions and the pre-game stuff. Did that play a part? Well, maybe it did.
Hindsight's a wonderful thing, isn't it? That's for sure. Well, Matty, a big thank you to you. It's always great to unpack Origin, but you look forward to catching up with you in a couple of weeks as we get a little bit closer to the NRL finals run, and that final run home is. When we get sort of a few weeks out, we might get together and pick that apart, hey?
Yeah, that'd be great. Thanks for having me again, Chris. Appreciate it.
We move on from rugby league and a state of origin focus and moving into the basketball, but it's quite fitting after we talk rugby league that Ben Dunn and I are rocking our rugby league colours. And Dunny, you're rocking, multiple sets of glasses there. Can you see Canberra on top of the ladder from Days?
No, I can't. That's why I have the multiple sets up. I'm trying to distract myself from how poor the Sharks have been. But no, look, your Raiders are going very well, mate. Very, very well. Soft draw, we won't talk about that, but anyway.
Now you play the teams in front of you. It surprised me as well, don't worry. So let's move in. Let's stay on the Australian focus. Let's talk the NBL. The draw dropped last week, and round one, there were some questions asked by a lot of people because they've said, where's Sydney and Adelaide? They're the two teams that have signed the best out of anyone. They're on the move. They will, of course, be playing against the touring Serbian and Greek club sides that are here. So that's the reason for that. They'll catch up their games later in the season.
Yep.
The whole, they've added in this the mid-season NBL competition as well on the Wednesday night. So we're going to see more basketball than ever. We're going to see basketball most days. I think there's a period over Christmas where we've got like maybe 18 out of 19 days in a row where we've got basketball on. So I think that all adds up to a really promising season.
Yeah, it's looking to be a pretty bang-on season. Lots to be excited about. And look, they've been very kind to us with the draw as well. Like you said, there's some stuff missing from round one, but from round two we get straight into it with United and the Phoenix clashing, and Bullets and Taipans in a bit of a Queensland battle, and then obviously Illawarra then raising the banner at home. So round four we'll see Kendrick Davis finally get his chance to step up and take on Adelaide then. So Kings and 36ers then. So we don't have to wait very long to see some of those marquee matchups, and it's promising to be a very exciting season.
Certainly is. There's quite a few when you look. There's always matches you want to circle. Whether as a club fan or as a neutral fan. I'm also looking ahead to round 7, another Sunshine South, Brisbane hosting Cairns. Round 7, Melbourne United versus Sydney. Delhi up against his old back down there. Those two are big ones as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, I think Delhi heading back to United will be a huge one. Plenty on the line there. And then I think the next big one that everyone will have earmarked is round 11 when Bryce Cotton heads back to Perth and gets to sort of take them on. So, yeah, look, there's that first sort of 3 months of the season. And then, like you said, the NBL Cup or whatever they're calling it now, that's kicking off as well somewhere in there. So there's plenty to feast our eyes on and really enjoy about this season. And then for the first time ever, the WNBL is tipping off at the same time. So they'll be running it like concurrently. So there's a lot happening there, although disappointing to see Shyla Hill get injured on the weekend. So it looks like she's going to miss the season now. So look, there's plenty of basketball out there for the avid fan, that's for sure.
Yeah, there certainly is. We've got Hoops Fest over in Perth as well. I think that's about round 17. Round 14, standalone on Christmas Day. Back to one game, Sydney Illawarra. The stoush between those two. We know that's a long old rivalry. And even round 8, Illawarra versus Melbourne, the rematch of the final series. They're looking forward to plenty of that. But yeah, I think for me, those games, those player movement games, and the big Sydney Adelaide game, Sydney Adelaide, Sydney Melbourne, and Adelaide Perth. Sydney and Adelaide are really going to have the targets on their back, which is kind of a weird situation considering neither of them that made the finals championship series last year.
Yeah, that's right. Saying that, and well, Adelaide's obviously going to be the big talking point with sort of Bryce and Big Montrez coming back and stuff like that. So they'll be definitely the ones that are, like you said, going to have the target on their back. But yeah, Sydney, they've, I think, second season under the new coach, they're right to sort of get started. Delhi coming in to sort of right the ship a bit. Kendrick coming in. They've got a lot to sort of play for, and they've got a lot to prove as well because they're always one of the marquee sides in the NBL. So I think it's really on to them to step up and renew that prestige, I guess you'd say, around them and sort of earn that moniker as the high flyers in the league. So I think we'll see it. I think Delhi's going to be that calming influence, and he brings that big game experience, which I think is really going to be helpful for them as well, and that's going to bring on some of the young guys. So yeah, I'm looking forward to see what they do.
Yeah, I think Galloway's going to take another step. Tim Flores re-signing and not coming back. That's a huge help for Xavier Cook. I mean, the Cooks can move down the roster in terms of size at different points, and they can create some very different looks there. They're in a good spot. I mean, they and Adelaide have gone over to Summer League with a few of these other sides to have a look at the missing pieces, but realistically, neither of them need anything at the moment. So be interesting.
No, I don't think they do, and it's going to be interesting to see how Galloway comes out of this little Boomers stint, like playing with some of the guys like the Jack White and stuff like that, guys who arguably been in his position a couple of years ago who sort of were fringe and looking to sort of break out. So it'll be interesting to see what he can take from them and the development he gets from that Boomers camp.
Certainly, I can't wait. The NBL and the WNBL all under the one ownership banner, all heading forward together, and it's not far away. We'll be talking about the season proper undoubtedly with yourself, and we'll get Tim Robinson back as well later in the season and really get into it. And I can't wait. I think we might even throw in a few live watch along nights at some point during the season.
Okay, I'm keen for that.
Well, Dunny, we've talked the Boomers just before, and that segue from Galloway. Let's go into the Opals. I was about to say they're about to head over, but they're already over in China for this FIBA Asian Women's Cup, and some people had asked the question, like they do with football and slash soccer, about, is it really Asia? But because of the depth of Oceania, Asia and Oceania have been bundled together for this Asian Cup for quite a while, both in the men's and the women's. Australia and New Zealand finished third and fourth, the last one. They are contenders in this competition. And it's an interesting competition. The powerhouse of China and Japan have dominated this for a long time, and they're going to be two of the teams to watch alongside Australia and New Zealand.
Yeah, kind of dropped out a little bit there, but yeah, absolutely. Australia, I think they've thrown over with the return of sort of Sarah Blissavs. Kayla George is obviously on deck. She's not over in the WNBA. You've got Izzy Borlays. Like, there's some definite talent in there. Unfortunately, we had a little bit of an injury in the warm-up game for Maddie Rocky. She's out, but Abby Ellis, who's done a lot of the camps and stuff like that, she's going to be stepping in and filling that void. So I don't think they're really going to miss too much there. But they did start pretty strong, the Opals, with the warm-up game against China, where they went on to do that one pretty comfortably in the end. 76-63 they got up, and Izzy Bourne did really well, leading all the scorers there with 15 points. So I think that set the stage really well, and I think they're definitely on track for another podium finish. Like you touched on at the intro, we've done pretty well in the tournament. We've podiumed every time, but haven't quite got to that gold medal game since the initial effort back in 2019. So hopefully we can get back up there and be competing for that again this year. But I think the experience of Blissavs and George and Steph Reed even in there, I think we might stand to do a little bit better this time, which will be excellent to see. But seeing girls like Ali Wilson and stuff actually finally get a chance to be full-fledged Opals and not just sort of the 3x3 Kangaroos team is pretty cool as well. So sort of seeing those girls get their opportunity, I'm interested to see how they go.
Great to see that attacking mindedness of 3x3 and how it's going to come into it. Obviously, they've all represented Australia at that level, as you said, and it's going to be an interesting one in terms of how the pools shape up, and we'll touch on that in a moment. The other thing that I love about this tournament this time around, we had this in Australia a couple of years ago, but they've gone with a second division as well, which means some of those Pacific nations especially, and most notably, because a lot of the Asian teams do get involved and come up and down into these tournaments, but notably Tahiti and the Cook Islands are going to get a chance to play at a bit better a level, and we know that you only get better by playing better teams. So I have a bit of an eye on those as well. Hopefully a couple of Pacific teams can do well there, but that was more an aside. I guess in terms of the pools, the big game is going to be the final pool game for the Aussies on the 15th of July. They start things off against the Philippines, who they shouldn't underestimate by any means, but they should get the win over. They follow that up with Lebanon back-to-back days, the 13th and 14th, straight into the 15th of July, up against Japan. This is going to be the one that decides who goes through in first and who doesn't, most likely. And it's key because of the way the semi-finals play out. It's a 6-team final series, so the top 3 teams all go through. The top team gets a bye, and that means they should likely avoid China as well. Yeah,
absolutely. Japan, and I think I would have rather had seen them earlier in the tournament when we got sort of those fresher legs, but these girls are all experienced campaigners, and not to sort of name drop too much, but I do know a couple of the physios that have gone over through my netballing days. So Paula Peralta, shout out if you're listening. She's one of the head physios over there, and I'm sure she'll have the girls in fine form and make sure that they're ready to play. But yeah, Japan on the 15th, 6:30 p.m. for those who want to tune in, will be some great viewing, and hopefully we get the Chockies in that one and make it through to the final.
Yeah, well, that's going to be the keys, and it's going to be interesting. Obviously, if we were to finish second or third, God forbid, we may end up in a situation where we're shaping up against China in the semi-final, which just makes it so much more challenging in terms of where we go. So we will see how that shapes and what that looks like, but keeping our eye over next week as we play through those pool games. They're all taking place from the 13th through to the 16th. The Kiwis have got China and South Korea in their pool, so they'll be up against it as well. It'll be interesting to see how their pool plays out as well. Maybe they can play spoiler as well for us and help us out a little bit there. Make a bit of a run themselves. It'd be interesting to see. I think their best finish is probably about 4th from memory in the 2023 edition, the last one here. So we'll wait and see how it all shapes. So undoubtedly a great chance to start to see how we're building over that next 4-year cycle, which obviously comes to a pinnacle every time with the Olympics. And the girls will be looking to aim for the 2028 Olympics as they come round. So let's move on and let's talk NBA. Let's talk some NBA trade talk, mate. We talked about this the other week. We did, a standalone video off the back of the draft, and we said that's going to really signal the trades getting ripping and rolling. And there's some opportunities. We talked on Summer League before, but there's moving pieces happening already and some significant ones.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the two biggest ones that we can sort of highlight at this point, obviously Drew Holiday. Well, I think we talked about that last time. That was already sort of done and dusted, but we needed for the 1st of July to hit for them to actually become official. So that's gone through. He's off to Orlando. KCP and Cole Anthony and a few draft picks go back the other way. I really think that Desmond Bain's really going to help Orlando. He sort of is going to help with that scoring load and to create that third option around Paolo and Franz. And speaking of Paolo, he's just signed his rookie super max, I think they call it these days, but he got the 5-year max, $287 million he's just re-signed for. So Orlando's definitely investing in him. So they needed an extra piece around him to make sure that they're sort of helping lighten that load for him and give him the best chance of success. The Kevin Durant trade that we had sort of touched on that we knew was coming as well. He's gone to the Rockets, but they ended up with this massive 7-team deal. So there's people going everywhere. Players have moved all over the place, sort of helping facilitate that one. But Kevin Durant, really probably the only big name sort of that we can sort of see out of that one. In terms of, Clint Capella going back in a bit of a sign and trade with, like, going back to Houston from Atlanta, like that's pretty big for the Houston depth. Our boy Jock Landale then gets moved out of Houston. He's agreed to a deal with the Grizzlies. I don't know if that deal's actually fully been announced yet. I know he's dealing with the birth of a newborn, so I don't know if they've even been able to sort of hash all those details out, but congrats to Jock and his partner. And then I guess the other one that's quite impactful for me is that Miami Heat have finally made a deal and a bit of a splash in free agency. So we managed to turn Kevin Love and Kyle Anderson into Norman Powell from the Clippers. The Clippers also then get from Utah, so Kyle Anderson and Kevin Love are going to Utah, a draft pick and John Collins are going to the Clippers, and then Miami gets Norman Powell. So I don't really see how that's helping the Clippers at all. Maybe a little bit of a salary dump with John Collins because Kevin Love and possibly Kyle Anderson are both candidates for buyouts. But yeah, I'm not really sure sort of how that one works, but I'm really happy to get Norman Powell in Miami because he's going to be great. As that he was arguably the guy that got the Clippers out of the funk last year, so I think he's going to be really helpful and impactful in Miami.
Yeah, I agree. It's one of the few things we share. We might not share a rugby league team, we certainly share an NBA team, and I'm really looking forward to that. The other one that sort of intrigued me was the Spencer Dinwiddie move to Charlotte. We saw basketball from him at Dallas because of the Luka Doncic trade, the Kyrie Irving ACL tear last year, and he played a really large role. He started, I think, 30-odd games. I think this is a nice piece to sit around LaMelo Ball. They acquired Colin Sexton as well. They're actually making some reasonable improvements. I mean, it's not groundbreaking stuff, but I think they're going to inch forward.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the thing that they did really smartly there, and even sort of Spencer's credit, is he's gone in on a minimum deal. So they've still got a little bit of flexibility in there to pick up someone on the buyout market or something like that that can really help their team. And like we touched on with the draft one, they have drafted really well. They've already got some pieces around them. So, yeah, I think, like you said, that can be really impactful for them as well. And they certainly seem to be building there and giving their young guys a chance to develop and turn into something that could actually be good. And I think that's probably been one of the most significant changes from the Jordan ownership since he got out of it, is these guys seem to be a little bit more invested on the future rather than the sort of win now thing that made, I guess, Jordan's tenure a little bit more reactive and prone to sort of some rash decisions. So I think it'll be interesting to see how they go. But they always usually talk about it being the Eastern Conference, like it's a little bit weaker than the West, but I think some of the moves that we've seen so far, particularly with like the teams like Atlanta retooling, the Knicks are arguably still strong. Boston's obviously blown it up a little bit, but I think there's a case that there are still some pretty strong teams in the East that are getting better. So it's going to be quite a competitive season, I think. It can only be good for the league.
It certainly should be good for the league. And, on the other side of the coin, we know LeBron's taken up his option with the Lakers. But while we're talking the East, one of the biggest, I guess, shadows hovering over this trade market is obviously there's still talk about Giannis and Milwaukee, who, they've made some moves, Milwaukee, but those moves don't seem to make fans any more secure in the fact that Giannis is going to stay. He seems to be more.
Yeah, you're right. And he came out and said that he wasn't particularly happy with the Miles Turner move. And look, if we look at it, Miles Turner has been a contender for the All Defensive Player of the Year. He's certainly someone who at times can show that he can shoot from range. But if we're honest and we look at it, he's more of a Brook Lopez light. And like them losing Brook Lopez, they're paying someone $25-30 million a year to come in and do what Brook Lopez just signed for $6 million a year to do for the Clippers. So is it a good financial decision? I don't know. But they had to use some of that salary cap space after letting go of Dame, I suppose. But Bill Simmons had an interesting way of looking at it, is that you're now paying like $45 million a year for Miles Turner when you factor in the buyout figures for Dame, when you probably could have kept him on your books because he wasn't expiring this year or next. You could have kept him on the books and then had a little bit more flexibility in a couple of years. But I think they definitely still need to do something to put pieces around, like losing Drew, losing Brook. There's some big holes to fill over the last couple of years that they haven't really addressed adequately. They lost Middleton last season. Yeah, there's definitely some holes to fill there if they're serious and trying to keep Giannis in town and make him happy and make them the championship competitor they probably should be, with arguably one of the best players in the world on their team.
Yeah, it's a puzzling one. It'll be interesting to see how it plays out. I think Bill Simmons, started throwing around calling people idiotic and stupid. So that was entertaining, never dull. I thought when this news started moving around about Turner that it might have actually been a trade involving Giannis, and that might have been where they played at with it. And you go, okay, well, that would sort of make sense. It seems odd for the Pacers to have let Turner go for what ended up happening. But I think at the moment, if he is to leave, the talk is that the Spurs might be in the box seat, and it might be Wemby and Giannis together. That could be scary stuff.
It really could. With Wemby, Giannis, De'Aaron Fox, they've got the newest rookie of the year, Stephen Castle there. They've still got some other pieces, Keldon Johnson, Jeremy Sohan. Like, they could put a very, very competitive team together. Obviously, some of those pieces are likely to move the other way, but the package that they could put together would be pretty attractive to Milwaukee. It could be quite interesting to sort of see what happens. And we still have a bit of time to go in this free agent period before rosters get locked in before summer camp. So let's see how they go. But yeah, everything is looking pretty quiet. And look, I wouldn't argue if Miami still had a move or two to make either. So let's see what happens. And thank God Kyle Lowry's agreed to a 1-year deal to return to the 76ers, because I really didn't want to see him back in Heat colours. Yeah,
I'm certainly not disappointed that he's not going to end up in Miami Heat colours. And yeah, it'll be an interesting one. The other one that's keeping me intrigued and puzzled, obviously, is Chris Paul as well. He's hinted that he might have one more season in him, so we'll see where that shapes. Yeah, there were rumours on Twitter the other day that he'd agreed to a 1-year deal to return to the Clippers, but nothing official sort of come from it. So, yeah, you're right. It will be interesting to see. He did do I don't know, not a TED Talk, but he was interviewed somewhere on stage by someone, and he said, he's got at least one more year in him. So 20 years he'll be cracking for. So it'll be interesting to see how we go, because he certainly wasn't the fastest and most productive in his stint in San Antonio. So it would be interesting to see what he's got to offer someone else. And if he is trying to get on someone that's a championship contender and chase that ring, what value does he give them, and how can he sort of contribute? I guess we'll wait and see. We certainly will. I think the Clippers and the Suns are the leading candidates for him, and it might be more of a mentorship and what he can pass on, you'd have to think, versus, as you said, his pace diminishing. But as always been done, there'll be a lot more twists in these tales, lots more to talk about over the coming weeks as we head towards the NBA preseason. Obviously, we've got Summer League going on, and then we'll know a lot more about what options are being taken up, what are these drafted players are on the move, and plenty more. There's a lot of Aussies. I think I saw a stat today saying that if all the Aussies that are listed for Summer League squads play, something in the realm of 84%, 83% of the games in Summer League will feature an Aussie or an ex-NBL connection. So that's huge. Can't wait to see Summer League. I can't wait to catch back up with you in a couple of weeks to see where these pieces are finally settling.
Beautiful. Can't wait.
A big thank you to everyone for tuning in. It's been a bumper episode covering everything from basketball, cricket, a little bit of AFL, talking plenty of motorsport, and of course, State of Origin, and that heartbreaking loss for the New South Wales fans. A huge thank you to our co-hosts this week, Ben Dunn, Brody Burrows from the Third Man Up podcast, Matt Willoughby, and our man behind the ones and twos, our producer that brings us here every week and makes sure we've got our content for you, J.R. Carter, helping out with the motorsport as well. Of course, you can keep up to date with us on social media at The Chris Mack Show on X, on TikTok, on Instagram, and on Facebook. And, of course, make sure you subscribe to us on our home here on YouTube. If you're looking for an audio-only version, you can catch us on Spotify as well. We've also got our daily doses dropping throughout the week, so check those out on our YouTube channel. Until next week, enjoy your sporting landscape, and we'll be back in 7 more days with another weekly episode talking the black and white of your sporting landscape. No grey opinions here.